Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate.
Howdy, good sir. Welcome back to Beyond the Workbench. It's been, I think, 2 weeks since we last talked, so a lot to talk about. Lots happened since then, right?
Absolutely. It's been a busy 2 weeks. I just got back from a trip to California. We have a mutual friend named Chris, who's an engineer for an industrial automation company, and he had tagged along with us to Sheridan. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to come to this work trip I'm doing to San Francisco?" So I got to go to Cupertino and have some amazing food. And we were talking about it right before we got started, but engineers are a different breed. He had something he needed for a project he was doing out there, so he ordered a burner 3D printer via Amazon to deliver to the hotel.
So explain what that is. When you say burner 3D printer, what exactly do you mean by burner 3D printer?
He bought a 3D printer specifically for a job that it was, $200 that for most of us would be like, this is the thing I'm going to use forever. But he needed it for that one job and he was done with it.
I've never heard that as wild as it sounds. It also tells you exactly where we are in this day and age. I mean, that you can order a 3D printer that works off of Amazon. Get one, that's a feat in itself. I order on Amazon, I get in a few hours, right? Put it to work, and I did it just for one thing. I'm assuming one piece or something he needed for a job he was doing. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a number of pieces for a particular project, but versus kind of going out and sourcing it from somewhere else, and when they're paying engineering rates by the hour, it was actually cheaper for the client to just pay for the 3D printer for that job than for him to have to spend those billable hours finding a different way to do it. So anyway, it's interesting to see how quickly technology is advancing in some of those. And I was trying to figure out how to put it in my suitcase to bring it home, and just wouldn't fit. But
once you add on the $80, baggage fee claim or whatever they have for the airport now for one more bag, then it probably would make sense. But I recently got into 3D printing this past year. I've really enjoyed it. But I've been looking at 3D printers for a long time, and they were very expensive, and there were all these options. They were confusing, and now it seems like things are getting very, very easy to use. And it's like using literally like using a home printer. I mean, you just have to do some work in terms of the files and things like that. But every day it gets a little easier, a little easier, a little easier. So much more approachable tool now than I would have imagined 2 years ago or 3 years. I'm sure there's lots of folks in our space that are probably using them for lots of different things. I mean, I'm using them for tool holders around the workshop. I'm using them for prototyping. I do a lot of jigs with my 3D printer. It's all stuff for the leather workshop, right? But it's also a lot of fun.
Talking about what's on your workbench, there's actually a box on your workbench from a 3D printer for holding tools for travel and whatnot. We were discussing that a little bit earlier. I guess share what that is and tell me what inspired that idea.
Well, I'll tell you, really what inspired was really you and this podcast and a lot of the travel we've done this year, which is I've been moving around. I've been, going from place to place, and I want to carry some of these tools with me. We have the Hard Text Leather Show coming up pretty soon. That's down in Waco. And I've noticed that there's all these people that have these not complicated, they have their own personal systems for how they carry the tools from point A to point B. I experienced going to Sheridan with you, where I had to carry a lot of my stamping tools with me. And I didn't know what to bring, how to bring it, how to pack them all up where they were safe. And so I've invested a little bit of time in thinking about how do I want to move through from point A to point B with my tools. I have a 3D printer. I have a little bit of experience now. And so I'm starting to kind of wrap my mind around finding a way to pack up my most useful tools, if I'm going to travel, keep them safe, but keep them all together and organized. It's a challenge. Then with the 3D printing on top of that I enjoy the challenge. I spend so much time in the workshop. I spend so much time doing Leathercraft work. To find another challenge to set my mind to is kind of therapeutic in a sense. And so is it overkill? Do you have to go 3D print your own box for carrying Leathercraft tools? Absolutely not. It's not necessary. It's not needed. If I put them in a bag, I do that. But it's a distraction. It's a way to use my mind. I'm not going home sitting in front of the TV, just what do people say, vegging out in front of the TV, which is something I don't really want to do. I still want to use my mind. I'm just applying it something different than what I normally do. So 3D printing it is. Been learning the software. And the software is any software seems to be always easier to use if you have a challenge in mind than just randomly taking classes and tutorials and things like that. So the challenge for me this week was create a box, which I did. You saw that. It actually came out pretty good. I'm amazed at how well it came out. And the next part of that is to now formulate these inserts that will hold my stamping tools, like 30 or 40 of them, that I can carry down to Waco with me in a couple weeks. So that's how I got there. I probably spent a little more time on this box than I should have, given all the other things that are on my workbench right now. But it's just part of the week.
There's a thing that has stuck with me, and I had never heard this phrase before. There was somebody in one of my classes a couple of years ago, and their business was Sabbath leather goods. And it was not a religious thing per se, although they were a person of faith, but they explained to me that the reason that it was named that was because there was a quote that I'll have to look up who it was. The man who works with his hands Sabbaths with his mind, and the man who works with his mind Sabbaths with his hands. And for this guy, he had a very, thought intensive job. And not that you're not thinking about things when you do leather work, but, it's a very physical, it's a very kinesthetic thing. And so I think there is something to that with, taking a break from your workbench to just do something thought stimulating.
Absolutely.
It is a Sabbath, so to speak, to kind of take that break.
Leathercraft as a whole for me has been that, right? Because my corporate background was in a corporate office, on phones, offshore phone calls, and big numbers and all this corporate jargon all day, every day. For a number of years, it was I come home and I do the same thing. I was just doing it under my own name. And I was doing my side hustle was my day job, just under a different name. You get burnt out. It's just too much. At some point, you're like, hey, I got to get off this laptop. I don't want to do this all day and come home and do it all night. It was too much. Leathercraft I think that's why I got into it so easily, is because it was completely different. It allowed me to use my hands, allowed me to use my creative. I was still using my brain, right? Which, an idle mind is when all the crazy things start going on. You start talking to yourself about all the problems you have and what about this and what about that. So for me, it was fill your mental space with something else, just not what you do in a day. And that's always worked out. Now years later, the way I do that is, so I'm not getting burned out on leathercraft. I fill my idle time with a different type of leathercraft. So most people know I'm not a tooler. That's not really how I've built my business in doing tooled items, although I've sold more tooled items this past year than I ever have. But the tooling you see me do, that's me filling my mind. That's my relaxing time. That's my creative space away from the Odin Leather Goods business. So same thing, it's still leathercraft, but it's a different type. And I think we all have to find ways to do things like that.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, talking about kind of getting started, because that's the topic that we kind of discussed, having conversation around today, is that we both get lots of questions around how do you start your business, or once you get it started, how do you fund different things? And so that really is a common question that a lot of people ask, is just how do you fund your startup?
Yeah. I get that question several times a week, actually.
So we'll just point people to the podcast now. Be like, I'm glad you asked. Here's a link. But I think it looks like a lot of different things for different people, depending on what your business is and, how you're trying to scale. I remember a story Jim Linnell shared about how he got started. And, when he was younger, someone would say, hey, can you make this wallet? And he would say, yeah, but I'm going to need you to supply the leather and, the kit. I'm probably going to need these 2 or 3 new stamping tools. And if I had that, I could do it. And he'd make a couple bucks, get a couple new tools. And, that's how he kind of grew his business initially. And I think even at the most fundamental level, right? Like he was a young person doing that. But I do think that is the thing that for any of us who are just looking to get started, if that's where you're at, is thinking about how do you at least make your hobby pay for itself?
I would say my story is not too far different from Jim's, it sounds like, which is I found a hobby. I enjoyed it. I was essentially investing in a hobby, right? Right. Hobbies cost money. That's just what it is. I mean, once you decide to go to a business, you want to start making money. That's a different story, right? But hobbies cost money. So the question, I'm just going to reframe it a little bit, which is how do I go from hobby to like make money and investing in this business I want? Well, probably especially the younger the people are that I talk to, the first thing I tell them is don't quit your day job, right? Don't get so enamored in this new hobby, this new craft that you go out and you make these rash decisions about, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go take out a big loan. I absolutely, it's just one guy's opinion, but I absolutely disagree with that. Now, I think what you can do, however, is you can shift your mindset from thinking that, hey, I work my day job to that's the really important thing in my life. You can instead shift your mindset to say that, hey, my day job is the way I fund my passion, right? It's a slight shift, right? And so instead of going out and get money from a bank or investor or something like that, I'm going to use my day job to fund my passion within due reason. You got a family, things that take care of your priorities first, obviously. But for a while, that's what I was doing. I was like, hey, I'm working a day job. I'm spending all this time there, 48, 50 hours a week to earn money to invest back into something I think is going to be more of my life later down the path. Right. So that's the first thing. Then past that, I will talk about where to find money. But the next thing I think you have to do is make sure people understand that what you need to invest is independent of everyone else. Right. It's solely dependent on you and your own journey. And I think that's very important because if you don't understand that it's your own singular journey, you will start to chase other people. You will say, well, Odin has this big machine and I see it's really cool. I see him using this. Or you say, Ben has this thing. I've got to go out and get this massive, you know, saddle stitching machine. The truth of the matter is that was my journey. That was his journey, whatever. You have your own journey. You're not in a race against anyone. If it takes you 2 years to save money for this thing that you need, or it takes you 2 weeks, whatever it is, it's okay. Leathercraft's been around a long time. You don't have to be in a rush to get all your tools and equipment overnight. That's where you get yourself into trouble and you start making bad decisions. So take your time. You'll get there when you get there. And then, of course, prioritize a little bit. Don't just get it because, say, I have it or, Magnus, you have it. You get it because you actually need it and you've seen it work. You've had a chance to play around with it and test it. You've talked to a lot of people. Don't just go spending money because the cool kids on the block have this thing, right? So now where do you get the money from? Day job, right? And then the best place after that is every job that you do, every dime that you earn from this hobby/business you have now, you just reinvest it. Every tool that I have in my workshop, honestly, pretty recently, I didn't acquire that tool until I had a job to pay for it. So I have to I'll just go back to like one of the very first big projects I did, which is a big project for like 5,000, it was either 3,000 or 5,000 bag tags. I didn't have anything I needed to do that job. Not a thing, right? So the customer says, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, I think I can do it. Yeah, no problem, right? And what I calculated in that yes I gave them was, if they pay me a deposit for this job, do I have enough time to get the deposit in the bank account and then order this tool that I need to make the job easier for me? Can I get all that done and then still actually execute on the job? The answer is yes. So that's how I got the tool. Tabletop clicker press that I have, it's 8-ton clicker press. Been a great tool. I still use it out there today. But that's how I pay for it. The job paid for that. And then I just put the rolling to the next job. The machine I got, same thing. I got a job and then I went and got the machine. Things like that I've done for events. Any money I put into my event setup, I got paid for the job first through deposits and things like that. And then I got the tools and the equipment. Now I've set it up, I would like to say strategically, I hope that's a word I can use here, that the deposits I get on any big jobs cover the cost of the tooling and the material up front. So I'm not holding in that cost. I'm really not investing my own money at that point. So I don't do a lot of deposits on the jobs that we do, but the bigger ones I will allow for deposits, but that covers everything I need up front. So that's really the best way to do it. Don't chase anybody else. Go at your own pace and let the jobs you're getting pay for the tools that you're going to acquire.
I think another thing with that too is setting goals. That's a thing that we talk about in all of the classes that we teach, is that it's you can never be successful if you don't have an idea of what that success looks like.
Agreed.
And is that you want to make leatherwork your full-time job in 5 years, right? To your point, don't just go out and do it, but start to make the steps and the benchmarks and the milestones that let you see if that's a viable plan. Or is this the money that you make on top of your day job that lets you take your family on vacation once a year? Or, but once you have a better idea of what those goals are, it just makes it a lot easier to measure what that success really looks like. And if you're on track to meet those goals.
Yeah, I agree.
My dad's an accountant, and there's a marketing term that I've taken and applied from his accounting practice. And that is, he talks to all of his clients and he says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I think that's true about your business and what you're trying to accomplish. That if you don't have some way to quantify what it is that you're doing, it'll always be a hobby.
Yeah.
Because there's not really a way to know when you've found that success.
I don't disagree with you, but also I'm not so naive to think that it's just like everyone wakes. I know I didn't. I didn't wake up and say, I have a business here. I want to grow a business. I want to grow a workshop and reach. I didn't have that much of a vision that far forward. I think the vision could be smaller to start off with. It could be just, hey, I just want to cover my expenses. I want to pay one bill. I want to cover my mobile phone bill this month, right? The goals only have to be meaningful to you, measurable, yes, right, attainable. Something that's going to stretch you a little bit for sure, but they don't have to be massive goals. If you came to me and says, hey, I have a goal that I'm going to leave my 6-figure job today, and in 6 months I'm going to be making $1.5 million on my Leathercraft business. Okay, that's a little lofty, guys. I don't care who you are. You may want to set it a little more manageable, like, hey, I just want to my hobby income or my small business income be 50% of the money I bring into my household. What is that number? And then you start marching towards that. If the goal changes down the path or you reach it a little sooner, you can always pivot. You can always adjust the goal as you go forward. But I absolutely agree. You need to have something on the horizon that says, I'm headed in the right direction. And we spend a lot of time. I know we got a workshop coming up in a week or two down in Waco, and that will probably be a lot of the discussion is about goal setting and what are real, measurable goals. But it's very personal to you. It can't be, I want to be like Magnus. It can't be, I want to be like, Don. It needs to be based on what I have to work with in front of me. My goal is going to be to maybe if it's revenue goal, maybe I want a 5% bump in revenue over last year. It's really hard to give examples of goals because they are so personal, right? It's also dependent on where you are at any given time, but it does need to be attainable and it needs to be based off of where you are today, not somebody else's goals.
I think for a lot of leather workers, that initial goal is I just want to be able to justify to my spouse why I bought another tool.
Yeah.
Because I needed it because I sold something.
Yeah.
But if you're, there's kind of two hobbies. There's doing leather work and collecting tools.
Yes, there is.
If you're doing more of one than the other, eventually it's probably going to come into question a little bit. So.
Well, maybe the goal in that case, the first goal needs to be, hey, I want to limit my budget into this craft or hobby to be X per month. So instead of it being just a free flowing, like, oh, I'm going to go down to the Leathercraft shop and I'm going to spend $100 a day and $200, and all before you know it, your spouse is unhappy because you've blown the budget for the first half of the year. Maybe the first goal is I'm going to limit my spending to this level. I'm not going to spend more than $150 a month for the next few months. I'm going to use what I have until I can grow past that in earnings, and then I'll increase my budget at that point. That's a reasonable goal. That's actually probably a goal I wish I would have set for myself, right? That's in hindsight, because I didn't have that ever. I was spending money like crazy. And it's very easy to do that because you really get passionate. You start enjoying what you're doing. You keep on going back to the Leathercraft store. You keep going online over and over again, buying more tools, many of which, if folks haven't figured this out, a few years from now, if you're in that mode right now, just know in a few years from now, most tools you think you need right now, you're not going to need. You're going to get rid of them. You're going to replace them. You're going to consolidate them down. So, take it. We all go through our own journey. We all have to figure a lot of stuff out on our own, but just know you will consolidate and you will simplify your tools over time. So it's not as big of a deal as you may think.
Now, I think that's great for those who are kind of getting started, but let's address some of the questions that people often have about kind of that mid-tier business kind of development. You have 2 brick and mortar stores and you do activations where you're going and doing live events. In the growth that you guys have had, is there any point that you said, I need to take out a loan in order to scale and grow? And what were the things that went into that kind of consideration either way?
In my case, I've not taken out any loans. I have taken out a line of credit, but no loans, right? So at first, everyone, when I tell people that, people are like, oh, that's awesome. That's so great. You've never done that. And years later, I don't know if that's always the best thing, right? That I have not taken out any loans. I've not taken on any debt. I have learned over time that the big guys, and I'm a very small guy in a very big pond when it comes down to this business. The big guys learn how to use their debt. Now, I want to say this carefully. I'm not telling anyone out there who's starting the craft to go out and take out a loan to buy machinery and things like that. I think that's wrong. But I think a lot of us probably are scared to take out debt for our businesses, right? There is a positive side to taking out debt in our businesses. The biggest positive to that is being able to scale and grow a little faster. For instance, if I had 3 machines to do this one thing, could I go out and get more business faster than if I didn't? As you get bigger, I think debt becomes a more viable option for people, right? Because you already have a revenue established, you already have a pattern established, things like that. Again, if you just started this craft last month, don't go take out a loan. Don't do that. That'd be horrible, right? But if you've already had a business in place and you are thinking about trying to scale your business because you want to open up another retail shop or you want to expand the capabilities of your workshop, I think it is something that a smart business person should consider what it means to go and take out debt. Big companies do this all the time. It's leveraging your debt. Debt is not always a bad thing. I personally was taught debt was a bad thing, and I was taught do whatever you can, never have to take on debt, no credit card debt, no loans, things like that. It should all be cash. And that is a very conservative way of looking at finances, but it also is limiting. So you got to find this balancing, point. And where I'm at right now in my business, I'm absolutely trying to find that balance point. Up to now, we've done everything cash. But it also means if there's ever a problem, if I've just invested it in new machinery or building or something like that, well, then I'm out of cash and I can't address the problem. That's an issue. It also means that when additional opportunities come up, I don't have cash because I've already invested it all, right? Versus if I went and leveraged debt, I could go to the bank and say, hey, I've made X amount of money over the last year. I'm on track to do this much this year. They will almost throw money at you because you are already proven that you're a safe bet. There's a high likelihood that you're going to be able to give them return the money. Banks only make money off the debt you take from them anyway, right? So they will give you the money. It's easier to get a large chunk of money from a bank than it is to get a small chunk of money. Go try to get a loan for $2,000. It's almost impossible. Go try to get a loan for $200,000. It's like, hey, here you go. They'll give it to you all day long if you have your books in order. And again, not advising people to do that now. I'm just saying debt is a option if you've established your business already. And so where we are, we probably will take on debt in the near future. Instead of using whatever cash I have in the bank, we have interest in opening up another retail store at some point in time in the future. I'm not going to do what I did last time. Last time, all the inventory that went in that store, the build out of the store, that was all my cash. We were living on a thread for a while because it was all invested. We hadn't had a chance to get in return on that cash. And if there was a problem or there was a big hiccup that I wasn't expecting, it would have been a pretty tough time for us, right? Probably would have been better for me to take out some debt to cover that build out of those things, right? Talking about finance, last time I bought a truck, I put down a large lump sum of cash. Back then, when I bought the truck, which was like 4 or 5 years ago, the interest rates were so low, it was really dumb for me to put down all my cash on that truck. I could have taken that cash and reinvested back in the business or something else and taken my business further. Instead, I was so afraid of getting debt. I didn't want to be in debt. I wanted to have the smallest, payment possible. So I put down a lot of cash down the truck. I got the truck. Cool. It's great. But interest rates were so low. It was like 1% interest rate. That was dumb. It was almost free money compared to now, right? Now I probably would use the cash, but back then I should have just financed it all. And then I had the option to pay more every month if I want to. I can still pay the debt down as fast as I want, but I have the cash in my pocket still to do other things if they came up, take advantage of other opportunities. So that's one way to look at it. Now, if you do want to go cash, again, I think the biggest thing to remember is it is your race. You don't have to be in a rush to do these things, right? You don't have to get every machine today. You don't have to get every piece of leather today. You can go slow as you want. Just because the guy down the street is doing it doesn't mean you have to. I go back to this concept over and over again, which is Leathercraft, and that's the business that we're in, has been around for years and years and years. It will be around for many, many more years. I don't have to achieve it all today, right? When I get in a rush about things, that's typically when I make mistakes. Go slow, be methodical about it.
I will offer a little bit of a different perspective on that as well, though. And this is a little bit of a detour from the leatherworking industry conversations, but I think there's still a lot to learn from other industries. And I mentioned Chris at the beginning of the conversation, our friend who went to Sheridan with us. And at one point, Chris and I actually started a software company together. And we did what they call bootstrapping it. We paid cash for everything. We did slow growth, and it was great. We never really had major stress about making a payment or something like that. However, the development of that software ended up taking maybe 3 years where it could have taken 1 year. And in a circumstance like software development, we would have had a more competitive edge having gotten it done in 1 year than getting it done over 3 years, because then the technology had come so far. We were redeveloping things. Maybe other people had similar ideas they were executing on faster. So I know that leatherworking has been around forever and it's not going anywhere. But if anybody is listening to this who maybe isn't in leatherworking, they have a really cool idea for custom made mailboxes. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. Garrett talked about really high end speaker amps. Those kind of things, sometimes being first to market is an important piece of that equation. And sometimes waiting on the cash to come in can end up costing you more in the long run. So again, I'm with you. I'm not advocating anybody go and take on debt. I generally myself try to actively avoid it. But I've also been in circumstances where, in hindsight, I realized had we just taken some strategic debt, we probably could have gotten further faster. So food for thought.
I think you and I are actually much closer than maybe it may sound like initially. It's just understanding the difference between good debt, bad debt, cash flow, making sure that the actions you take are pointed towards some real goal, not just buying stuff for the sake of having it and building out a workshop for the sake of having a bigger workshop that you're proud of. It has to be tied to some type of business decision and a business plan. And then it goes back to, like I said, the goals. What's your goal? What's the intent behind this need for money? Is it to grow? Is it to go faster? Is it just to, you really got to ask yourself all these questions. The first big expense I had in my business was I bought a sewing machine. That's probably for many people in the leathercraft space, right? I know we talked to a lot of folks that listen to us. We've learned, actually really honored that so many people have listened to us within the leathercraft space and outside of leathercraft. But specifically for those crafters, the first big thing they want to buy is a sewing machine, right? You got to say, well, why is the sewing machine so important to you? Well, because I want to go faster. Okay, that's fine. But if you've never used a sewing machine before, it's going to be a while before you actually go faster. Okay, at least in my case. Maybe there's some savants out there that they buy it immediately, they're off to the races. But for me, I bought a sewing machine. It's like $2,300 that I didn't have at the time, and it still took me like 3 to 6 months before I felt comfortable using that machine to get any type of real product out of it. Right. So if I built my case all around, I'm going to invest this money today, and I'm going to get a return on it immediately. No, that's just not the way it works, right? I didn't account for this learning curve I have to go through. So again, just be very clear and honest with yourself about why you would take on debt. Now, another way of finding money that I've actually been really surprised over the years to find that a lot of people have investors. I personally don't have any experience in this. I don't have any investors. That is probably not a sign of me being smarter than everyone else. In fact, it's probably me being a sign of being more scared than everyone else, right? Because I lacked maybe confidence in even what we were doing, to be honest with you, because for the idea of people giving me money, and I've had people offer me money for my business over the years, I never took that because I couldn't figure out what their angle on it was. What I did not see at the time was they saw more potential in the business than I did. One, that's a compliment. That's awesome that they saw that. But two, it's also a little scary. Like if you see it and I can't see it, we're not aligned. And that's not a good place for me to be. Now I can see, I see the value. I have confidence in what we're doing here that I would consider. I'm not looking for investors. No one start calling me. Don't call me tomorrow about this, but I'm not considering right now. But I would hear people out if they want to invest in the business because now I understand what our value is. I've got the books to tell me what the value of the business is. And so it's a little clearer. But there are far more people out there that have gotten investors than you may think. So here's my personal admission and story, which is, and this is why I tell people don't be in a rush. There have been points of times in my business. I don't know, every 6 months, I don't know. I see not a competitor, but I see someone else in the cohort. I see someone standing next to me and say, hey, man, they have done amazing things this year. They were really able to ramp up their business and do this and do that. And I'm like, man, what did they figure out this year that I haven't figured out? Why were they able to ramp up so fast? And maybe business didn't slow down for them like it did for me this summer, right? I want to know, of course, well, how do I adjust? How do I make sure that I can stay on track with them as well? What I've later found out is that they got investors. And I've had these conversations with them. They look at me like, what do you mean you don't have an investor? I just assumed you had an investor. You're able to do this, do that. I've never had an investor, except for my wife. My wife is definitely an investor at this point. She invests a lot, time, money, patience, whatever. Okay. Kids as well. But in terms of having an outside investor and putting funds into our business, we've never had that. So it is possible to grow without taking on a bunch of money. But you have to consider the downside of that is you will have to go a little slower at times. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's bad.
I think a lot of us are very humble in what our businesses are. Not everybody. And I think that even in the software company that I was referencing earlier, we had a number of people who came and said, I love what you guys are doing. Can I give you $10,000, $20,000? There wasn't even a lot of stipulation on it. They just really supported what we were doing And it made us wildly uncomfortable because we had so much appreciation and respect for that individual that we didn't want to let him down, because we were like, well, it was a little bit of imposter syndrome, with our own product. And it's a hard place to be. And so sometimes, when that situation comes up, again, hindsight 2020, probably would have gone back and said, okay, why? I want to hear this out. What is it that you see? What is it that you would like? What's your angle? Because sometimes it's just they've bought into your vision and they want to be a part of what you represent. And it's not even about they have some secret hidden agenda or that they're even terribly worried about being disappointed. Honestly, if somebody's just offering you $10,000, they probably have $10,000 to lose. It's not about the investment. It's about putting their money in something they believe in. And you do want to be respectful of that. You do want to make sure that you're a good steward of those resources. But yeah, I agree to your point. I think a lot of it is that we don't feel worthy of that. We don't see what other people see in our business or even in ourselves sometimes.
I could definitely connect with that for sure. In hindsight, I think it took me a while to figure out why I felt that way, but you're absolutely right. That imposter syndrome, the fear, it's a fear there, right? I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to be holding the bag for, this person who gave me this money. Well, investment's an investment, right? They most of the time they will know that nothing's guaranteed, right? But you still don't want to let anybody down. As we grow, I start to realize that there's also a need for some of these people, especially if they're very affluent. They've got to do something with their money. They've got to put it somewhere. If not, they're going to get taxed on it, right? And so they're really looking for vehicles to avoid some taxation, things like that. And so they have their own angle. And if we educate ourselves and we learn about these angles, of how people manage their own money, I think it would make it easier for us to maybe see opportunities that we would not see otherwise. Certainly, I have a lot to learn in this space, but I'm better now than I was some years back. So while I'm not asking for anyone to call me to throw money into Odin and Magnus anytime soon, I'd be more amenable to a conversation now than I was last year.
I do think that, something that a lot more people can get on board with is kind of this idea of like micro investment or even crowdfunding, right? Because
Absolutely.
if somebody's, giving me $5 a month, $10 a month on Patreon, I feel like I can provide that much value for a group of people. And there are a lot of different models for crowdfunding and, which crowdfunding is taking small amounts of money either through subscription or, when people do things for GoFundMe, those types of things, that's crowdfunding. And I think sometimes that's maybe a little bit more of a comfortable approach because in a lot of cases, you're not indebted to somebody. You're providing a service like Patreon is something where, people can give $5, $10 a month and it's not going to break the bank for them. But if you're providing a value for them in what you're doing, they want to support you. They want to make sure that it's sustainable for you to continue to do that. As a creator, then well, I have $200 a month that I have coming in. It's not a lot, but I know that I can plan to pay one thing. Or like even for the podcast, we have an editor. Instrumental Media does our editing, and that's an expense. That's something we invest because we see the value in what this is doing. But I do think that there is opportunity for letting people help with that sometimes, particularly if you're able to provide a value. I guess what I'm getting at is we should start a Patreon.
So, I mean, I think that's a great way of looking at, small micro investments. I think for us, Patreon allows us to say, we're only getting support people who find value in what we're doing, right? And the goal, we talked about goals, or we have a goal. The goal is to cover the expenses of this podcast. You and I were committed to doing this anyway, but it would be nice, obviously, to cover the expenses. It allows us to be able to justify taking time away from our businesses and our families to sit here and talk and ramble on and on with each other because the costs are covered, right? And I think a lot of people can look at their situations like that. There's other ways to fund these activities. And there's been a lot of creative models out there, but Kickstarter, things like that, that's all, I think, viable if you really at that point, the only thing you really have at risk is your reputation, which obviously is very valuable, but it's not like the bank's going to come knocking on your door asking for, that loan to be paid off every month. Patreon for us, I mean, that's kind of like performance-based pay. If we do Patreon, which I agree we should, that's essentially if the listeners value the time we're spending together and the content we're giving, a dollar here, $3 there, whatever it may be, it just goes a long way to help cover the cost. That makes sense. But we're only getting it if we are performing.
Right.
So I feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, you guys heard it here. By the time this publishes, we'll have a Beyond the Workbench Patreon. But you did mention one that I think is interesting and kind of ties a lot of this conversation together, and that is Kickstarter. And I do think that that is maybe an interesting angle for pre-sales, right? Like, so it's not necessarily a subscription where you're kicking in a couple of bucks here and there, but let's say that you have a brand new design for a wallet, and you know that there's going to be some capital expenses in being able to produce that, and that the retail value is going to be 140 bucks. But anybody who wants to be part of the Kickstarter, so to speak, maybe they kick in 80 bucks and they get this pre-sale, and that allows you as a business owner to have access to some of those revenues early, to buy the machines, to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. And maybe it's a limited edition run, right? Maybe what people are getting is going to be similar to what you end up selling, but this is an exclusive to kind of your initial crowdfunding. And so I think there are some things to learn and even think about in bridging the gap from where we started the conversation about some of that coming up with capital expenses and getting that deposit. Well, that deposit doesn't necessarily have to come from one person. Maybe there's ways to do that from 50 or 80 people. You just get in trouble if it's like, 1,000. It's a great problem to have, but now you're on the hook. So
Yeah. I mean, there's been Kickstarter. I mean, there are a ton of wild successes on Kickstarter where people have raised millions and millions of dollars for this very unique, innovative product. But those probably overshadow some of the smaller ones of people just doing these small projects where they're just trying to raise a few $1,000s, right? It does seem that the successful ones are ones that were very open. They were very realistic and very transparent about what they were going through and why they needed certain machines and what they were going to use the money for, so forth, so on. They weren't setting really lofty goals and making these promises they couldn't deliver on. I do think that's still a viable way to do things. You have Kickstarter, you have Indiegogo, and what people are looking for is they're looking for value, right? So give them $100 wallet for $80 and you set reasonable expectations for why it's better than maybe the other options that are out there. Absolutely. And again, you don't have to, if it doesn't work out, you're really not risking too much. You go at it again and see if you can come up with a new value proposition, new product at a later date that does move the market. The one thing I would say, however, as I'm talking about Kickstarter, I think the one mistake a lot of folks do is that they limit their circle a little bit too much. They limit their investors or micro investors, whoever it be, to family and friends. That's a really easy way to wear people out, right? If your business, I'm going to talk a little crap here, so I apologize if I don't want to offend anybody, but I probably will. If your business is based off of family and friends and cousins and aunties and moms, supporting you in every product you make, you don't have a business yet. I mean, that's no different than us giving our artwork to our mom and having her put it on the refrigerator at that point. Your business has to get beyond that really warm market, that circle of people around you. That's where you know if the market's going to support you or not, right? It's got to be market supported, however you want to define that, your neighborhood, your community, or whatever. So what that means is you're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to get out there in spaces that maybe you don't normally operate in. You're going to have to show people your work. You're going to have to be a little fearless, right? And maybe going to that farmer's market and letting people look at you funny while you stand behind your table, telling them why you have the best belt in the world, right? And why your belt costs $200 versus the one they bought from Wieners for 25 bucks, right? If you want to grow your business, that's going to just have to be part of it. If you're introvert, you're going to have to be not introvert when it comes down to your business type of thing. So get beyond your family and friends and then grow that way.
I think there's a key component, and this is not my idea. I remember somebody saying, and I wish I remember who so I could attribute it appropriately, but they said, in order to do crowdfunding, you have to have a crowd. There is that component of building that audience first, because then there's lots of people who are ready and willing to make those contributions. But yeah.
Well, with that crowd, I'll end on this. That crowd, there is one more way of making money, which is content. Content is an amazing way these days to generate income, right? And some people are doing it in big fashions where they're generating lots and lots of money, and they're using their intellectual property, their IP, they're using their knowledge to generate money. That's one way to go about this as well. If you don't have the money to create a company, well, maybe there's content opportunity there for you to sell your content and share that to the world, and use that as a fundraiser for your other things that you're doing. We could probably all turn on YouTube. We have some people that we follow. It seems like either you're a product maker and you sell products, you retail products, or you're a content maker and you sell content. You go either way. I'm trying to be somewhere in between. I'll let you know how that goes later. Still, the jury's still out on that. But if you don't have the money, one way to do it is to share your growth with everyone else. Tell your story, share your story with people, and see if that helps generate. And you're not even generating money from those people that listen to your story. You're generating money from the advertisers and things like that around you. And then maybe you can leverage it into something like a Patreon, later. But content is a outstanding way to generate capital for business as well.
I agree mostly. I do think that's a good point, but I do think that you have to be somebody who can make good products in order to be able to teach people how to make good products. I can teach, I can sell. I am not going to be the guy who you sit down and take a leathercraft class from, because that's not my domain expertise. And so
Fair enough.
I think that is one of the challenges too, is that there are a lot of people out there who are content creators more than they are producers. And that doesn't always result in the best advice or setting people up for success. Some people teach you how good they are and not necessarily how for you to be good. And I think there can be a little danger in that, not just for individuals, but for the industry. So I think finding
Yeah,
that
there's that too.
I think finding that happy middle ground, which you're talking about, is really key for people who are making content, but also can back it up by doing it.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair assessment as well.
Now, you mentioned one thing, and I want to wrap us with this. We always wrap about something that we read or heard recently. You had talked about being fearless in sales a little bit ago. And this isn't something that I read recently, but it is something that's very topical for this conversation. That there is a book called Rejection Proof by a guy, I believe his name is pronounced Jia Zhang. There's an audiobook for it if you're not a big reader. It's not a super thick book. It really has to do with the kind of the background in it. Is this guy left his 6-figure job to go do a startup for a technology company, and his wife said, you know what, you've talked about this for a long time. I don't want you to take this to the grave that it's regret. If this is something you really want to do, try it for 6 months. And then if it doesn't work out, go back to a corporate. And the author, he tries to pitch an investor. It fails. And about 2 months in, he says, you know what, I'm going to go back to my desk job. And his wife says, no, I said 6 months. And so then he has to kind of process, okay, how do I get over my feelings, my ego, and how do I lean into getting more comfortable with rejection? And that's really what the book is about, is he starts actively seeking rejection to get more comfortable with it in the things that he learns along the way. And it may be as simple as he asks a security guard if he can borrow $100. And the security guard says, no, why? But there's a why. There's an in to be able to explain and justify. And so the book, easy read, great audiobook, but it is full of just little gems of wisdom and a very fun and interesting book and story about seeking rejection to get more comfortable with it and what's learned when you lean into no.
Just with that small story, that immediately makes my Audible book list right now. So I'll go buy that, and I think I have a few credits over there to use. So that's a good one. That actually resonates with me because I actually am, people don't believe when I say this, but I'm more of an introvert. I'm happy to be by myself at all times, right? However, I tend to be more of a driven person in terms of business. And so anything you see from me that come across as being outgoing and talkative is a reflection of me desiring to be successful with my businesses more than my desire to be by myself and be comfortable in a quiet space, right? So that's how I've always been able to justify pushing myself out there. When I do videos, or right now I haven't done any videos, but when I do videos, it takes me a while to get ramped up to do those videos. And then I have to say, you know what? The video is the right thing to do from the marketing perspective and from your business perspective. Get over your crap, essentially. Get over your shyness. Just get on there and do the doggone video, right? That's me, the conversation I have with myself constantly, right? And so I just get over it because desire to be successful is more important than the comfort I typically seek. So I'll leave that. So that's an excellent resource. I'm going to go download that one. Listen at, like, how long do you think it'll listen? It's a couple hour long listen, maybe.
I'd have to go back and look, but I think somewhere between like 5 and 7. It's not like 14 or anything.
That's a sweet spot for me. 5 or 7, that's good. That's a few long drives in the truck traveling down to Houston or something. So I'm on that one. For me, I think I don't have a resource to direct people to this week. I have a recommendation. People go back and do something that's actually fairly easy. The last 2 weeks, I have gone back and I had some conversations with some old mentors. Some of them didn't even know they were my mentors, but old bosses and mentors I've had over the years. And it was just simply as me calling them and saying, "Hey, would you like to get some coffee?" And they were, honestly, they jumped at the opportunity to have coffee. And I thought maybe I was wasting their time, but they actually said, sure. And next day we're having coffee. And I got more from those conversations in the last 2 weeks than I have from anything else I've done recently. It was refreshing to get some feedback from them. It was refreshing to hear that maybe some of the challenges I'm experiencing are not as unique and all about me as I thought. It was refreshing to get a different perspective to tell me that, you know what, it's really not a big deal. It's actually just do this, and this is another way to get around that. And you're like, heck, I've been racking my mind around that challenge for the last 2 weeks, and this person in 2 words fixed it for me or gave me a solution that I hadn't considered. And it was all because I reached out to people that I highly respect, I love, who have given me value in the past, and I've just went back to revisit with them. There was no agenda for the conversation other than just reconnecting. But the fact I just reached out did so much for me in the last 2 weeks that I want to encourage everyone else to do that too. If you're in a place where you have you're challenged, you're having some struggles with your business or whatever, reach out to some people around you. They don't even have to do the same business. Most people I deal with don't have anything. They don't know nothing about Leathercraft. They really don't have anything to do with small businesses either, but they have some success in other areas. And oftentimes those successes translate into lessons that I can glean from and I can apply to what I'm dealing with. And there's 3 big conversations. And one of them actually was with a gentleman who was near ready to quit his business recently, and hearing how he basically was several days away from giving it all up. And he just stuck it out one more day. He had that just one more day attitude, and he waited one more day. And next thing you know, the business hit, and now things are off to the races for him. And he was right on the precipice, the cusp of quitting. And to hear him go through that and say, I was so close to letting it all go. And if I had done that the day before, I wouldn't have the success I have today. That's motivating to me to hear that. And so, yeah, go back and have those conversations, make those phone calls, call those mentors, call those old bosses, talk to those people that you respect and have gotten so much from the past, and reconnect. You'll get a lot out of it.
Sounds like I got some calls to make.
I got more to make, so you and me both.
So this discussion really came from questions that we often get from people. And if there are any questions that you are thinking to yourself as you're listening, reach out on Facebook, on Instagram, to Beyond the Workbench. We would love to hear your questions. We would love to be able to have those as discussion points. We want to make sure that what we're doing is providing value to those who are, sharing their time with us to listen to us ramble and chat and really just kind of hang out. But if there's anything you're curious about, if there's any questions you have, reach out. Beyond the Workbench on Instagram and Facebook. And you can find the past podcasts at beyondtheworkbench.com. That should take you to where you can find them.
And we'll get that Patreon going, and I guess we'll get the link of Patreon on the website as well. And I'm sure you and I will be talking about it over the next few weeks and reminding people about it. So yeah, I think that's also a great place to connect as well. I think there's a chat feature there also. We can talk to people, which would be really, really cool. So just for me personally, thank you everyone who's been listening over the last few weeks. I've got some really good feedback from folks. People seem to really be locking into what we're talking about and getting some value out of these conversations. And that's motivating. So thank you for the feedback. We're going to keep it going.
Until next time.
See you. Thanks.
Post-production by Instrumental Media.